Welcome to Nacht Waffen Pilot with Penny Bradley. And before we get to our guest, Eric Hecker, I want to make a statement for my audience. I have recently been contacted by more than one man who thinks he has a telepathic connection to me. It ain't happening. Get over it. I have telepathic connections with 8 individuals that have been ongoing for years, and nobody else extra is part of the party. So please come back to reality. And if you need to see someone professional and get help, please do. Just because I'm a woman on air does not mean that you have the right to do this. Thank you to everyone else for tolerating my rant. Welcome, Eric. I understand you wanted to talk about Majestic 12 today.
Yes, I did. And you didn't have to apologize to me for what you had to do. I understand that entirely. It's interesting, the variety of folks that reach out. Some are helpful, Some are helpful for sure. Some are less than helpful. So I apologize that you're having to go through that.
Because of the nature of what I talk about, there are a lot of unstable people out there who are contacting me. Now, I don't want anybody out there going off the deep end because they're listening to me. I don't want anybody out there, they're contacting local government people. I don't want anyone out there harassing anyone. It's just, we're exposing the truth. If you want to do something, write to your Congress critter and ask for an investigation of the CIA for child trafficking. Do not mention space or they will deep six your message. Just ask for the Congress to investigate the CIA for child trafficking. That is the extent of what I am asking the public to do. And please, don't try to have a telepathic connection with me. I have shielding up. It won't get through. So,
back to MJ12.
I know we have been talking this week about the Majestic 12 stuff, and I have shared documents that I had bogarted.
Yep.
And I don't know what all you've found. So
well, I do appreciate you sending those over. I did start to look into them, but as always, there's piles and piles of things to dig through. So they're in my to-do list. So thank you very much. We're winding up getting to the conversation faster than I was able to go in that direction because there was a couple of other rabbit holes that I had gone into recently that I'm still kind of lost in and trying to get back out of. Technically, the MJ12 thing just kind of really fell on my lap because I've been following through my work for quite some time now a gentleman by the name of Lloyd Berkner, who I track back as far as Bird's first Antarctic expedition.
Wow, that's a ways back.
Right. So this guy's been in this game a long time that I've been tracking him. So, I mean, from the Antarctic expedition to he had apparently a very meritorious career in the military where he got credit for winning some battles. That it was
Wow.
his techno advancement of some of the stuff at the time that he finagled to figure out radars and things differently that really did some big stuff for technology and for battles at the time. And he had that on his resume, and a multitude of other interesting, I guess you'd say, energy related things. And that eventually got him over into Brookhaven National Labs in a peculiar little office that was intended or titled, I guess you would say, for the purposes of basically disseminating the information learned at Brookhaven through all of, collegiate offices and things like that. So that's what they were saying his job was.
He was head of propaganda.
That would be one way of looking at it, is yes, if he's in charge of that information, then yeah, that's a crucial chair in how it gets communicated. But again, that was only one hat that this man wore. And I've seen his name on all kinds of documents and paperwork that I've been tracking through the Stargate program, through Operation Paperclip, through all kinds of different programs in Brookhaven and Long Island proper, and all that post World War II calamity with the MK Ultra stuff. So this guy's in there all over the place. And it's just come across my radar that he was also one of the founding members of MJ12.
Wow.
And it blew my mind. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, now we're going to add this to the list for Mr. Berkner, that now he's also a founding member of MJ12.
Yeah. For the audience, you want to explain what MJ12 was?
I was going to ask you, because now this is where I'm getting right back into your direction and why you and I connect.
Okay.
So now this is where deciphering my experience needs other people's experiences, because I have certain histories, but I have certain limitations to knowledge bases. But I reached out to you because I know you know what MJ12 is.
I actually know someone who worked for them, but this person is not public, and I will not be exposing this person.
Okay.
But because I know this person, I know that MJ12 was real. Okay. Even though the FBI is currently writing bogus over all of the historical documents. No. So I thought that was amusing. This is their current way to debunk things. Lou, they can hear you on air.
Hey, no comments from the peanut gallery.
He's having problem with the cat.
Oh, that's all right. It's funny.
She's playing with my green screen.
Oh, that's funny. If the cat comes through, that'd be fantastic to pull off.
Oh yeah, no. The green screen was $80. I would rather it not be destroyed. Thank you. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting show today. Majestic 12 was an organization that was put together by Harry Truman himself before the treaty was signed with the Germans in Antarctica. And it was kind of his oversight committee for all things related to the Germans in Antarctica and UFOs in general, and how this was going to be handled officially by the US government. And they even had them classified as 2 levels above very top secret. So this was a higher classification rating than the H-bomb had been. So we're talking, this was, which is no wonder that the FBI is unable to get verification that they were real, because they're not that level. So it gets really interesting sometimes when you read through what people write about it. I know there was a article on The Verge that made fun of us for believing in it, and the article on Wikipedia is hilarious. They're trying to be respectful while making fun of us at the same time.
So you're saying that a lot of people are still thumbing their nose at the existence of MJ-12 technically?
Yes,
Oh, that's
there
funny.
are outrageous numbers of people still making fun of us for having historical documents in our hands.
That's funny.
So yes, it is what it is. If you don't want to believe something, you're not going to believe it no matter what evidence is presented.
Mhm.
And that's why I've stopped even bothering about evidence.
There's stuff that I was taught in submarine school that we were taught was currently declassified, but that the mainstream media was still presenting all of the propaganda. And they just said, technically we were allowed to communicate the new declassified information. Like if we were ever asked would be the way that they would put it. And they were just kind of suggesting like, there's no reason to go running and telling everyone what they know is wrong. Like
they're not going to believe you anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was actually brought up as well, was they said, good luck, but yeah, we were taught stuff like that in submarine school, that things are, there were certain missions that happened a certain way and certain things went down differently. But if you turn on the Discovery Channel, they're going to, tell you the battery compartment blew up and that's why that submarine is missing.
Yeah. There's lots of crap that happens in this world that is very, very, very different from what the official explanation is, to the point that I no longer believe official explanations at all. They're just ridiculous.
There's a great book that I recommend to everyone called Blind Man's Bluff, and it describes a lot of the subterfuge going on in the depths of the ocean in the submarine service from its inception up until about the early 90s. It covers, but it's a very good book, and it tells a lot of stuff you've never seen anywhere, and it's true. It's all true.
That would be worth taking time out of my busy schedule. Yeah.
I had just pulled up the MJ-12 list of names, and just oddly enough, if you go to Wikipedia, the Lloyd Berkner's the first name on the list technically.
Yeah.
So I thought that was funny too when it gets pulled up. And then another big name on there that
we're on radio, so you have to read the names.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just looking at it myself for reference. That Berkner is there. We have Bronk. We have Vannevar Bush, which is a big name in the Bush family. I'll admit I'm less versed on Vannevar Bush than I am some of the other Bushes. There's also James Forrestal, Gordon Gray, Roscoe Hillencotter, Jerome Clark.
Let me interrupt a minute.
Yep.
On the list that Gary McKinnon pulled up out of the U.S. Navy's computer, there was a ship named for Hillencotter.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So this is quite consistent with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jerome Clark Hunsaker, Donald H. Menzel, Robert M. Montague, Sidney Sowers, Nathan F. Twinning rings a bell to me for some reason. I'm not 100% sure why. And Hoyt Vandenberg. Vandenberg seems like an old family money name to me. But another one that I find interesting.
There's an Air Force base in California that's Vandenberg, and they were used to test missiles. And I used to live near it when I was in junior high.
And I just clicked on his name. It says he was the second director of the CIA. Very interesting. Hoyt Sanford Vandenberg, second director of the CIA, was also MJ-12, apparently.
Yeah.
And then Hunsaker, I just find interesting, being a child of the 80s, a latchkey kid, so to say. I saw the name Hunsaker on the list, and the first thing that popped out into my head was the movie Lethal Weapon, which was about covert operations, the CIA, the illegal drug trade, and black projects and things being at such a secret level, and you have no idea what you guys are getting yourselves into. You don't want to mess with this, and blah, blah, blah. That was the plot of that movie. The main character, the evil guy, his name was Hunsaker. That was the last name of the super secret bad guy.
I didn't remember the details of the movie,
I know.
just that it was a action movie where the plot was that this was a guy from deep state,
Yep.
from the kind of black ops that I was in.
Yep. Yep. And his name was
And
Hunter.
yes, I was in those kind of black ops when I was younger. For those of you who think that my 65-year-old disabled chubby body is not acceptable, I have not always been this age or this size. So
I was totally unthreatened when you came to Alaska, technically, Penny.
good. I didn't mean for you to be threatened.
No, just teasing.
No, I got off the plane, had to go through your COVID check for Alaska. And on the way out, they're telling me I have to keep a 6-foot distance from everybody. And the first thing I do is hug you.
Right? We showed them.
And the guard was like, all righty then.
Yep. Take that, rules and regulations.
Yeah, well, I did promise to stay at your house the whole time I was there, and I only broke that twice.
It was worth it. You had to go see Alaska.
Yeah.
That's like, it's a pretty state.
It's gorgeous. It's really, really gorgeous. I was there in midsummer, and it is true that the sun never sets.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, we just passed solstice, so that's a big turning point for us now. Everybody gets all excited that we're headed back in that direction because we're at the peak of darkness right now. I took the dog for a walk this morning, and it was I don't know, 9 something. It was still pretty darn dark out. I was looking extra careful for moose in the shadows.
And yes, folks, there are moose in Alaska.
Yep. We just got warned off the other day. We were taking the dog right over by the train tracks. We go strolling and taking our usual routine. And fortunately, people look out for each other here because one of the neighbors started screaming and yelling from the second floor window of their house to not go. They must know the path we go on. And they just started yelling. They said, there's 2 moose. There's 2 moose. And we went in a different direction and came about. And there was 2 big male moose. And we would have crept right up on them. And one of them was already laying down to begin with, and we would have startled the heck out of him. No, not at all. The dog would have run. My girlfriend would have run, and I would have been a moose speed bump.
Okay, my understanding about Majestic 12 is that anytime that there was a crash of a UFO, that they would send someone to investigate, and that they would pick up the witnesses. And they eventually had the mind wipe technology that's used in the space programs, and they would erase their memory of the event, just like they disclose in the Men in Black comedies. And so if that didn't work, because it doesn't always, then they would intimidate these people. And if that didn't work, then the people would disappear. And there were lots of witnesses that suddenly went mind blank or suddenly disappeared. So we seem to have a strong streak of not listening to authority in at least the American people. And to be honest, that gives me hope. We're not all sheep yet. But okay, they went through, and after the Germans in Antarctica buzzed the White House in 1952, when Eisenhower was sworn in, he signed the treaty with them. And after that, it became official policy to be completely top secret, for the public to not be told the truth, because they thought it would induce panic. Now, you have to understand, this was only 20 years after, Orson Welles had done The War of the Worlds on radio and people had killed themselves and their families. That had induced nationwide panic to the point people were killing themselves. So this is 20 years later, and they know that most of the UFOs are Germans from space. So they know they are not a threat to national security as long as they don't shoot them down. Well, then we started getting ETs showing up. And the last figures that I had were that there were 125 ET races who have treaties with the United States and therefore permission to come into our airspace. Now, all you folks doing CE5, those are the folks you're contacting, because anybody else comes into our airspace, they get shot down. And yes, we do have the technology to shoot them down now. So what I find interesting and irritating and embarrassing as an American is we lost to the Germans in Antarctica. We were given a peace treaty that allowed us to believe that we were still running our own country, and yet we have not done the same for the nation of Germany who surrendered to us. I think that's, I'm going to cuss. I think that's a fucking dick move on our part.
I'm going to fill you in on an oddity in this conversation that I think you're going to really appreciate. When I went to Antarctica, I had no SSP thoughts in my head. I didn't have that realization in my life yet at all. I'd had plenty of odd life experiences that I was, collecting. Mm-hmm. But here I am at the South Pole, a historian in my head still. But the staffing was something that I would joke about with my coworkers. I mean, I'm a hacker, I'm a German plumber, and I have all these other German plumbers on my plumbing staff, and I'm looking at the entire facility and looking at people's names and languages that they speak and where they come from. The vast majority of them were from Germany, and we used to joke around on my crew. We would say, like, well, it almost seems like we didn't win the war, but at least it's nice they don't wear their uniforms here. It was like that. We used to joke
win the war.
Yeah, we used to joke around about that all the time.
That's something that I've had people argue with me. Well, of course we won the war because blah, 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 blah. And I go, why do you think our foreign policy has not changed one iota since Eisenhower?
I would tease the German scientists.
We are the policemen of the world. Who put us in that position? Why is it that you can elect from one party this time and the other party the next time, but nothing ever changes?
Right.
Everything just gets more and more concentrated in the hands of the corporations. Why do you think that is? It's because we, the people, have no say. It's being run by top down. Now, the Germans in space do not have complete control. And that's something folks don't understand either. They think it has to be one boss. No, we have opposing factions who are infighting amongst themselves, fighting to undermine the authority of the Germans in space, who have, by the way, they run things through the director of the Trilateral Commission, a position used to be held by David Rockefeller, who inherited it from his father, Nelson, who was vice president when Eisenhower signed the treaty.
And if people truly understood how think tanks like the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations actually impacted our legislative processes and social structures, they'd already be in the streets rioting.
Or ALEC. ALEC is owned by the Koch brothers. and they have their entire agenda. They write up the legislation and pay the legislature to put it through.
Yeah, legislators don't write 5,000-page bills.
No, they don't. Alec is writing that, and it's owned by the Koch brothers,
Mhm,
and German names again,
mhm.
KOCH, and they have an extremely conservative, racist point of view. And they are writing the legislation that's going through our state legislatures, our national Congress. And you wonder why things keep getting worse.
Mhm.
And nobody's stopping them. I mean, I remember what, 2010, 2012, that region, there was a lot of opposition from the truther movement, but then when the current president was elected, there was something came up that called Q that preempted the truthers and kept them chasing their own tails instead of paying attention.
This is the fun
And
of COINTELPRO.
it's exactly a fucking COINTELPRO. And I know so many people that got sucked deeply into it, and now that we have the election mess that we have now, they are in this deep depression because Q said he was going to win. I'm sorry. I mean, it is what it is. You don't really have a say in it, and who is put into office on January 20th may not be who you expect. And I'll just put it that way. No matter who you expect it to be, it may not be that person because somebody else has a different agenda and they don't care what you want.
Not in the slightest. It is literally a circus. The media is a circus, both literally and figuratively. It's like the three rings and the spotlight and the conductor. And pay no attention to what's going on when we shut the light off over in that ring. We're just really setting up for something else. And that's what COINTEL is all about. It's just that
Well,
two-step of controlling where the light comes on, where everybody in the audience focuses their attention, and then they'll let that skit run for a little bit until it's old and a worn out, tired skit. And then they shut the light off there. They turn the light on to the next ring, and everybody goes, "Ooh, look, we have something new to argue about now because the light
yeah.
came on. So let's argue about that now, because that's what's really important right now."
Well, that and during the Obama administration, those of us who were paying attention
Mhm.
were aware that there was legislation put through in a NDAA, which funds the military and therefore has to be passed. Okay? There was legislation added to that allowed the Voice of America to give propaganda that they would normally give to other countries to the American people as well. And the effect of this was that it was now legal for the media to lie to you. And this was when Fox News became suddenly very popular.
I'm kind of flipping out a little bit that you just said what you just said, because I had something written down that I was going to bring up called Project
Well,
Troy. Have you heard of it?
no, but I've heard of Operation Mockingbird.
Okay, Project Troy, from what I'm digging into, seems to have much of the same players from MJ12 in it, from back in the early
Really?
50s as well. And it is all about the Voice of America radio network and the first time that they found that the Soviets were impeding upon it.
The Soviets didn't like our propaganda any more than people like you and I do.
Understood. This is really interesting. We're
They're
getting
not.
right back into that.
I don't understand why everybody thinks that other countries, the people are stupid. They're not.
Hmm.
The Soviet Union did not get to be an empire physically the size of the United States by being stupid.
Right. And
And people are like, well, they're the Russians. they're evil, they're stupid, they're communists. Well, right now they
That's
are more
propaganda right there.
right now they are more capitalist than the United States is, because we take everything in our tax base, we keep our people poor, and we give that money to the corporations.
Yep.
How is that not the same idea? It's certainly not capitalism, because if they were providing services worth the money, they wouldn't need to be subsidized.
I think back in the day, people used to just say simple things like actions speak louder than words.
Exactly.
You know?
The Soviet Union fell, the Russian Federation is back,
Mhm.
and they are capitalists. So anybody that says the Russians are communists in this day, they're fools. Point blank.
People have a belief system.
What the Draco in space would call Raka.
We have the belief of this post-Soviet country because of all the Soviet propaganda. I mean, this was billions
It's
of
because
dollars were invested on people having that opinion that Russians are dumb.
Yeah. My generation, we were literally taught the Russians are gonna bomb us. You have to learn how to get under your desk so that you can survive a nuclear bomb.
Mhm.
Sorry, school desks are not gonna save your ass from a nuclear bomb.
Mhm.
That was just
And then the long
fear
and short of
porn.
this, was there really an actual threat, or were there just corporations manipulating nations to get funded?
Okay, from my background in space, the United States, all of the allies, and every nation that has nuclear weapons are buddy-buddy in space. They're running these programs together.
Correct.
And they are propagandizing their people on Earth so that they can raise taxes to pay for it.
All these
missing trillions of dollars in the Pentagon budget, they're going into the space program.
There will never be an all-out war like we used to have. We're past that now. Because of what's going on in space, the machinations of war will be displayed almost like seasonally, like mating birds, you know? Everybody's going to come out and bump their chests and show what they're all about and lock horns a little bit here and there. But that's about it. It's just like war season. Like animals have mating season. We have war season now.
There will be weaker ethnic groups that will be genocided. That will be what goes down. They are culling the stock, trying to get a more pliable version.
I had in my head a kinder term. I was thinking assimilated, but I mean, it's still
no, they're not planning to assimilate them. That's why they're bombing the countries that they're bombing. Mm-hmm. They're doing it in the name of oil or now lithium. But the truth of the matter is that these countries have ancient technologies that our people have just now started to realize were actually technologies instead of just rocks. Mm-hmm. And they finally figured out how to use some of them. And they're trying to figure out how to reverse engineer them and use them for our military. What I think is amazing is we've had super soldiers for 20 years talking to the public about being used as super soldiers. And what is it? In the last month, we've had how many articles about the Chinese making super soldiers, and the French are genetically modifying their soldiers to make them better. And well, of course, the United States has to do it to keep up. And we've been talking about super soldiers for decades.
I've seen stuff with my own eyes in 1994, things that were done that were way beyond the capacity of a standard human being. They were up.
Putin has been complaining about American super soldiers for how long? Decades? A decade at least. Mm-hmm. Only he's calling them Anunnaki because they are so much bigger than normal humans that he can't fathom that there are people people that have been shot up with drugs, people that have been DNA modified. So,
We had Navy SEALs on my submarine base that I would almost say were batched out. Like we had a whole bunch of dudes that almost looked like they were like carved out of the same mold.
yeah.
It was intense.
Now, I have to ask, what are those individuals thinking? What, because they see how much different they are than everybody else. How do they function? Are they limited to the base because they're obviously top secret? Do they have any quality of life of their own? Do they have any freedom of choice?
I couldn't answer all of those questions, but what I could say is the ones that I saw were training harder than I've ever seen anyone else train or even heard of training technically. I used to joke around and say that you could set your watch by these guys doing laps around the base.
Hmm.
But when I say doing laps around the base, I mean for days.
Yeah.
At the same pace. These guys
Hmm.
would run in formation. I won't say run, a solid jogging pace in a good tight formation. I would say maybe 6 wide and maybe 8 to 10 deep. In a nice tight formation, and they would run the grinder, the main drag of the base, for days, and you could and they weren't losing pace. You could sit in the smoke pit, and they're going to come around again, come back around, and they didn't stop. And that was, I mean, I knew why they were training that way, is they insert really far away from where they got to be, and guess what? You're hoofing it. So,
Yeah.
welcome to training to running for a week.
Well, I know someone who was a DOD assassin in Vietnam, and he would be dropped off a couple of clicks from where he was supposed to be and have to hoof it
Mm.
and find the location and then find the target and then wait until he had a clean shot.
Mm-hmm.
And then, with everybody pissed at him, he had to find his way back to the assigned pickup zone where there's going to be people shooting at the chopper, and he may have to have a second pickup zone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's not going to be close.
No. So, yeah, that was in Vietnam. We're talking 1960s.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, and yes, I do know these people.
Yeah, and I'm sure. So those are the lessons learned that now guys in the 90s are training, because they certainly know that happens now. There's no mistakes about it anymore. Sometimes running for a few days is required.
You can do some things in jungles that you cannot do in deserts because there is no cover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
yeah, training is wild. You got to train for real. You got to train for the circumstances. My career in the Navy was short-lived, but I can tell you one thing: they put me through some motions where you learn that your body and your constitution are both a lot stronger than you had imagined before. They just put you through trials and tribulations that don't give you the opportunity for any other outcome than the outcome they're looking for. So then when you see the outcome they're looking for can be garnered, then you realize you can do it again. So, I mean,
yeah.
that's the way the military teaches you, is, you don't know how to swim? We'll throw you in the pool.
I was not in Earth level military, so I don't know what they do for training. I do know I was raised on a dairy, and Dad's regimen. I not only know about second wind, I know about third and fourth, and most people don't.
Yeah, and and I'm not touting it, but I just know that you have the history and the Constitution for this conversation that I had with another gentleman. He was telling me when he was growing up, he was a homesteader up here in Alaska, and he was saying how his dad would teach him to do things. And he was saying that one time they were logging and they were trying to get a huge log in the truck. And he's, you know, and he was saying, he's like, I was, you know, 8, 9 years old. He's like, I'm small now. He goes, I was even smaller then, you know. He goes, but my dad was telling me to get that log in the truck. And he goes, I couldn't lift it up. He goes, I was too small and blah, blah, blah. And my dad was yelling at me. He goes, and I started like, you know, whining to him that I couldn't get the log in the truck. And he goes, my dad slid his belt off and kept whipping me. And he goes, it turns out I could get the log in the truck.
That was kind of my dad's attitude too.
That's kind of what I figured your farm was like. So I figured I would just share that story for you because I know it's nice to have peers. So
it is nice to have peers. It is nice in this day and age where folks are not allowed to touch their children to know that there are still people who remember getting a belt swing every time you said can't.
Right. Yeah. There's an interesting way of life.
So my way of life was very similar to military.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it wasn't.
You never got a promotion on the farm, huh? You didn't get any rank or meritorious service.
I did eventually get to where that I was assigned tasks and he did not stand over me while I was doing them.
Well, that's pleasant.
So I would be able to think my own thoughts while I did whatever the hell it was he thought I needed to do that day. Mm-hmm. My father got hurt at work when I was 12, and I was the oldest of 5 kids, and he considered us his personal work crew. He couldn't do it anymore, so we had to do it for him. So he died in 1980. And I have a lot of unresolved issues.
I can imagine.
That's a polite way of putting it.
You know something? I wanted to run across some other oddball things that I've been coming across in my research as well this week. And they're topics I think you'll get a kick out of. So you are familiar with Robert Monroe of the Monroe Institute, correct?
I am. I have done an overview of the Monroe Institute, and I think 1 or 2 of the books involved. I have not researched Robert Monroe individually.
I'm digging into him because he's definitely a part of what's going on in my past. And I'm re-digging up because I lost the trail of. But do you remember there used to be a radio show called The Shadow? Only the Shadow.
Oh, yes.
You do, right?
Yeah. When that came on, you did not get between the radio and my grandfather.
Oh, okay, cool. So you tell me, what's your best recollection? If I was to say, Penny, tell me everything you know about the Shadow.
The Shadow was in between human and spirit, and was used as a boogeyman. Because the Shadow knew what you were doing, and if you were really evil, would take vengeance on you.
Right. That was the character, right? And
that was the character, and there was this really deep voice for the narrator.
I've been looking into this because it turns out, from what I'm seeing, it appears that this show, The Shadow, might have been a massive disclosure project back in the day. Because
that was
apparently they were disclosing in the show that the character, the Shadow, was versed in the ancient mystery schools of old, and only he could understand the knowledge. But he also understood that the people in his time period will never understand what he understands. So he has to.
Oh, mystery schools.
Yeah, this is like straight up like. This is like right at par for the course of just disclosure back in the day that no one was listening to. And here's the part that's really interesting. I'm hearing that Robert Monroe of the Monroe Institute was actually one of the original producers on that show, like working the show.
There's so much behind the scenes. Oh yes. That doesn't shock me. That was to do with his brain work. That was the same time frame. I've blanked on his name, but the guy from JPL.
Oh, Parsons.
Yeah, Jack
Parson.
Parsons
Yeah.
was that
It's not
time
Jack
period.
Parsons Lab, folks. It's Jet Propulsion Lab.
Yeah, it was Jack Parsons' lab.
It is Jack Parsons Lab.
And I visited that when I was 14. No, I was 13 when we visited that. And it was soon after I visited JPL that I was abducted and taken to a Baphomet ritual. I came up on the radar because I had to have a military background investigation in order to visit JPL. But it was a school thing. I was taking space science. And so it was back when they did field trips.
Yeah. Do they not do
But
that anymore?
My kids didn't,
Okay.
but we live up in the mountains. So yeah, we had a field trip to JPL, and it was after that that I was picked up and taken to a Baphomet ritual.
Jeez.
So yes, it is definitely Jack Parsons' laboratory, and they were doing a lot of the stuff for NASA for the Apollo missions.
Yep.
And I actually lived near Edwards Air Force Base at the time, and my space science teacher went rock hunting with some of the test pilots.
And
so yeah, I was in the thick.
Jack Parsons was in quite a circle of really eccentric folks, I guess you would say. It would be putting it really nicely.
He was in a circle of serious occultists.
Yeah, I mean, occultists, I think, might even be being nice too. They're bordering on Satanism.
I think a lot of occultists would be insulted that he would be considered one of them.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't
because he was that extreme.
Yeah, so I don't even know how to place him. I would almost say he might have been a practicing Satanist with some of his friends. I'm not certain.
That's from what I remember from the time period. Yeah, I mean, why would they pick me out of a group of 30 kids that went on a field trip to take me to meet Baphomet?
Yeah, they were.
That's, by the way, folks, that's how I know he was a red alpha drac, is because I actually met him in 1970.
My brain's going in the direction of that these folks worked in dark energies by choice. And it goes in the direction of, again, I quote Mark Passio a lot lately, but his words ring true on a lot of stuff. He's a hard person to discount. You don't have to believe in what these people believe in. You just have to understand that they do believe in it. So if they
do believe in it and they get results.
If they feel that doing some ritual is going to get them the outcome that they're looking for, they'll do the ritual.
And they don't care who they hurt in the process.
That is correct. They are very organized, and bad people organize faster than good people. Unfortunately, that's what history teaches us time and time again.
Yeah. That's because they feel threatened from the beginning, so they organize together for self-defense, where the rest of us think, well, gee, we're the majority, we don't have to worry.
That's a good way of looking at it, is they feel threatened. I mean, it's a fair perspective to say that they maintain that. So yes, they would be in action first. It's logical.
And they usually have plans that they know are not in the best interests of the majority. So they're trying to act as quietly and under the radar as possible. And that does require a certain amount of coordination and organization to pull off. And but there are times that I really wish I was able to organize as well as they do. It would make the job of disclosure a lot easier, but I'm not into the practices that they were. I have ethics. One of the biggies for me is you don't kill living people. You know?
It does make it challenging, and but this is it's frustrating because this is the issues with war, more or less. And in something like this, it's a war. It is kind of a good versus evil thing, and it is challenging when you cannot simply reduce yourself down to the low level of your enemy.
Yeah,
Because you do need to, if you're going to change yourself in the process, then your enemy has already won.
exactly.
That's effectively
If
what
you
they want.
if you become the same level as your enemy, they have won.
Right.
Even if you actually objectively win, they
Right.
have changed you into a mirror image of themselves.
Right. For example,
And
Satanism, if it requires pedophilia for them to have success, then that makes it bad in my book. So I would say
mhm.
that people opposing Satanism, if they were to then consider pedophilia practices to defeat their enemy, then they've already lost. Would be a good example.
um, I'm going to point out something that a lot of the audience is not going to like. In my researches, most Satanists are wannabes, and they are not pulling off anything near what they're purported to. Okay, there is no actual being that is Satan, and as far as I can find, um, there are 5 very ancient beings who are all ETs who are operating different religions, and they are the groups that most people understand as Satanist. And it's really, really hard to overcome that propaganda, because you don't have to worry about the Church of Satan. They're actually just a bunch of atheists that are pulling everybody's legs so that they can um, stop the overwhelming Christianity of the government. But on the other hand, Baphomet worshippers are trading in adrenochrome, which is taken from children who are being tortured. Um, Moloch worshippers actually still sacrifice their firstborn, and if they don't kill the kid, they have to raise it as trans, the other gender. Um, and they are the ones who are doing the stuff like in the movie Eyes Wide Shut. And then there are the folks who worshipped Marduk, and they sacrificed babies to him. And there's a couple of more.
It's my understanding.
Azazel is even in the Bible, and he was the one that they sacrificed the scapegoat to. And these are real religions that go back thousands of years, and each one has a different ET as their god. These are not these are not what people think they are.
I had been reading something recently that was stating that, again, whether this is true or not, I don't know. This is what was stated, that Marduk was in control of planet Earth by whatever contract or edict or whatever for a very long time. But that I think in 2016 or 17, that he was removed from power
Mhm.
and put on trial and effectively killed. Do you have any info on that? And I want to start with the idea that he was. Do you agree that he was in power? Was that a factual statement?
Yes,
Okay.
that's a factual statement. Um, the Galactic Authority, the government of the galaxy, considered him to be the rightful ruler of Earth.
Okay. How did that
Still
happen?
does. That's because that's because there is a cyclic thing among the Jahami History knows them as Anunnaki,
Okay.
where that they have this device called the Tablets of Destiny.
Okay.
And it passed between the royals every 2,000 years. And Marduk had it for the last 2,000 years.
And is that just a possession thing technically?
No, it's you own this device that is basically a terminal onto the computer that runs the matrix. So you are literally the god of gods while you have this. And he benefited from the last war between the two Anunnaki brothers, Enlil and Anki, because he was Anki's firstborn, and he took possession of Earth, and the others could not take it from him. So during this 2,000-year period, he has been paying the taxes on Earth to the Draco.
And this was a manifest being walking the face of the earth?
Yes, this was a physical 3D being, yes.
Okay.
And his tour of duty, I guess is the best way to look at it, was up in September of 2017.
Okay.
And he turned over the tablets to Tiamat, who is a reptilian dragon person. And she chose someone else to have them. And I'm not going to talk about that part.
10-4.
But
so Marduk's not a title then? It's a name for the person that had the tablet.
Marduk is the name of the individual who had them.
Is there a title that goes to that?
Yeah, there's a title. It's called the L.
Okay.
EL.
Okay.
And the L is if you look through historical records, the L is the chief god. And
Temple Bethel.
Yeah. And so after he was no longer L, he was arrested by the Galactic Authority for crimes against a sentient race, which would be us, because he was accepting child sacrifices. Now, there's a lot of complicated rules in the galaxy. One of them is that if the humans do it to each other, they won't intervene. But since the humans were offering children to him and he accepted, he was in trouble.
Gotcha.
And there are rules about consent, that if you don't say no, you've said yes. And that is consistent with what Mark Passio says. Yes, guys, I have studied Mark Passio's stuff.
Probably way more than I have.
Probably, yes.
In most departments, I think you've probably studied things more than I have.
Well, I'll put it this way. When I remembered being in Schwarz's sauna in space, I was trying to figure out what I was remembering. So I did a lot of research, and I have come to the conclusion that Schwarz's sauna in space is not the same as the SS on Earth were. It's also not the same thing as the Order of the Black Sun. And
I feel like I've always noticed the differences in your descriptions technically. So I think you're getting it out there right. I would say from the way you communicate those things, I would take the Schwarzschild from you as very much more educational, like a school.
It was. They gave you black goo, and then they taught you to use your psionic abilities in a science way and to harness the energy of the emotions you still had after the black goo, which were mostly anger or anger related, to take that energy and apply it to the psionics to have a more powerful effect. And in a lot of ways, we were very much like Darth Vader. I think that Darth Vader was actually, the Darths in Star Wars were disclosure about Schwarze Sonne.
Hmm.
And we did use sex magic. So it was remembering how to do this stuff, but not having the structural foundation for it. So I've done a lot of study to figure out what the hell am I remembering.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a lot. I did a set of interviews with Gale of Gaia. They're on YouTube. And I got a lot of nasty hate mail because I must be a demon if I know this stuff. You know, come on, guys. You know, don't shoot the messenger. I'm telling you the truth. Nobody else is going to. Just me, Mark Passio, and Eric here have the background to tell you the truth and the willingness to do it. And I don't know about Eric, but Mark Passio has expressed frustration that no one wants to listen to him. And I'm getting to the point, it's like, if y'all are going to keep threatening me, I may just fucking disappear on you.
It is very
I'm
frustrating.
on the side of humanity. I want you to survive the shit that's coming.
Yep.
And no,
totally
it's
get that.
not. And no, it's not 1,000 years of golden age. We are in the worst part of space where there is the most trash, the most junk, and the trash hitting the sun creates solar flares. And guess what? We're losing our magnetic shield. So, you know, you're going to be sitting here with no shielding and all the space trash. This is a very dangerous time in our orbit of the galaxy. And y'all think that you're going to ascend. Sorry, guys, ascension is dying. And then your spirit may go wherever your vibration takes it. But in the meantime, you ain't going to be here.
Here's a secret wisdom from the ancient teachings of the masters that all of the positive thinkers don't understand and will fight to the death and say that I'm wrong. And it's the only thing that they'll put energy into is that they can't just think positively. They actually have to do something. In this war, which it is a war, you actually have to do something. You can't just think positively. And that's the only thing that'll get people mad and engaging with me is they'll say, "You're wrong. No, how dare you say that? You can't say that I have to do something." Yes, I can.
There's something else. You will never get rid of the darkness by ignoring it. You will never get rid of the darkness by becoming more light. You will only get rid of the darkness by embracing it and becoming in the middle. And you think you're going to get a muddy gray, and you're not. You're going to get the whole fucking rainbow there. Mm-hmm. But you're too scared of the dark.
That's more or less it, is that people can't look at their shadow self. They can't do the work that it takes. They don't have the constitution to be that honest with themselves. But boy, they can apply that scrutiny outwardly. You know, everybody has outward scrutiny, and they can give you all of the criticisms of everything else outwardly. But boy, you want to look inward on someone, and you'll get defense mechanisms and triggers so fast and furious.
I have reintegrated 31 altars. Mm-hmm. And those altars have committed some incredible crimes. Mm-hmm. And when I reintegrated the altars, they became part of me. And I had to deal with that part of me had done these things. So I'm sitting there and I'm doing my inner work. I'm having to embrace my evil altar as part of myself. This is the work that shadow work is about, is saying, yeah, part of me is pretty bad, but I'm choosing to love it anyway. Because if I don't love myself, all of myself, then I'm no good to anybody.
And then even in that exact same vein, right? So now by assessing yourself, growing and learning, the honest person can look backwards and assess that they made a mistake in the past and grow from it, as painful as that may be. To not go through this process is simply ignoring your past, not growing from your previous mistakes, and continuing to be not a better person. I mean, better is better. If you can improve yourself, then that should be a goal. Better is better.
Well, it's spiritual bypassing.
Mm-hmm.
And out of all of the current gurus out there, Jeff Brown is the one that I think nails it. You have to deal with that you have a dark side. You have to embrace it. You have to do the work of sitting there looking at yourself instead of saying, oh, I don't have that. That's not me.
Yeah, how many
Yeah,
people?
it is. Everybody else sees it except you.
If you could literally sit down with a list in front of you of every mistake you've ever made, how many people would actually have the backbone to do that? I wonder. You know,
I have made so many mistakes and
I don't
been
want to see the
forced.
forest that would have to die for me to read that list.
Yeah, it's like, how many pages do you want it to be? You know, I have fucked up in so many ways, so many years, and people tell me, but Penny, you're my elder, and I'm going, do you know how I got to this point? It was by doing the work that you don't want to do.
And you know something? I actually imagine someone like you, that if I actually could produce this list, right? If I could sit this down in front of you and go, Penny, look what I came across here. This is for you. It'll help you with your efforts in the future. You're the person that would actually be like, damn it, but thanks.
Exactly. I would do that. I mean, you know, it's, I was, I was to the point that I hated myself so much that I could not keep living that way.
Mm-hmm.
And when the NSA activated my memories and I could remember blowing up planets full of sentient beings equal to or superior to humans, the guilt was overwhelming. I was having trouble living with that. I still have times I have trouble living with that. And it wasn't made easier when an ET group whose planet had been destroyed approached me about talking to the real Federation, the Germans. They called their group Das Bundes. So I was asked to approach Das Bundes about them having a replacement planet. And it's a telepathic race. So I got all their feels. And they thought they were summoning a demon. That's their view of me in space, is that I'm a demon. And that hurt. That hurt, that's how I'm viewed out there. And these beings were so desperate that they summoned me to help them. That was the real eye-opener, was having a group of beings, they were the sole survivors of their race, contact me to try to get them help. And because I still have alters in service and enough bleed over, I was able to get them help. And but I'll never forget their whole attitude.
That would be rough.
It was. I hope no one else ever experiences that, of being summoned because they're desperate and they think you're a demon. But it put a whole new light on what I was remembering, that not only was I mortified, but that I have a reputation in space of being basically
Yeah.
basically the modern version of Attila the Hun, only in space.
Mhm.
And I'm like, that's been really hard to live with. And I try really hard to be kind and patient and understanding with people because I know how evil I have been in the past.
How much of your time in the programs would you say would have been in situations of conflict? Could you put a percentage to it, so to say? Is that a fair question?
My main job that I remember mostly is being the navigator and being responsible for taking the ship or ships together into hyperspace and coming out with nobody inside a wall or a floor or another object.
Okay.
So that took a lot of my time. But some when we were not in transit, um, we were usually involved in putting down a rebellion in the Draco Empire. That's what the Germans do to pay the rent on their colonies, is they serve the Draco. And Germans are efficient and they take their responsibilities seriously and they do a good job. And when there would be like an EMF field around the planet, shielding it from electronic weapons or electronic devices, they would pull me to guide the weapons through the shielding. Um, so my involvement would have been from the spaceship. I'd say probably 10% of my time in Nacht Waffen that I was involved in something resembling conflict.
Okay.
Um, I was primarily a navigator, but I was definitely in a military situation.
So,
Now, I had alters that worked for Kruger,
okay.
and they are military. And um, in that capacity, I'm normally a fighter pilot.
Got you.
So that's like 80% of what I did was military conflict.
Okay.
Um, and because of the nature of the beast out there, you have Kruger fighting on one side and Monarch on the other. So a lot of the times you have humans fighting humans in ET wars we had nothing to do with.
Wowzers.
So
What's the purpose of either faction being there? Money? They're just mercenaries?
they're just the companies are mercenaries, and
Monarch and Kruger?
they sell our services in exchange for advanced tech. But the Galactic Authority has limits on what we're allowed to be given. So we're basically being given children's toys.
That also sounds to me like technically there's just some humans that are willing to harness up some other humans to march into death or whatever. If they live, so be it. But either way, we get to get the technology.
Yeah, that's exactly their attitude. The trouble is that they're killing humans off. They're sacrificing their fellow human beings
Mm-hmm.
in order to get what the ETs consider to be toys.
Mm-hmm.
And the Galactic Authority has been mortified because these toys are being reverse engineered and combined with other technologies that also came from toys.
Mm-hmm.
And we are creating our own technology from their cast off toys. And we're doing things that they didn't think would be possible because we may be smaller, we may not be as smart, we may not live nearly as long, but we're adaptable and we have a genius of creativity.
It does seem that we have engineering skills beyond a lot of the other species. Seems to be a common thing I'm seeing as a theme.
Well, as a species, yes. And remember, I served with the Germans, who were the best engineers on the planet. So they have that genetic preference towards engineering.
I found myself pretty good at fixing things in a pinch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's I hate to put it in those terms because people will take that statement and say, oh, she's racist. No, different groups have chosen to let certain skills survive.
Skill
That's
sets get created
and
through practice, and it's just a
skill sets
reality of life.
get sharpened through practice, but the genetic capability to have that skill set is inheritable. So
Yeah.
if the person who has that skill set is able to support more children,
Mhm.
that gene gets spread through that group.
Mhm.
And that's just reality.
And
I mean,
you're
we
right.
have,
Experience carries on. It does matter, you know.
but you look at, we have musicians that 3-4 generations they've been musicians and they're great at it. You have athletes 3-4 generations and they're great at it. And we have engineers that, hundreds of years of German engineering, you know and they're famous for it.
Mhm.
And but when you say it, people are like, that's racist.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I'm not saying anybody else is bad, just these people tend to have this ability more than the rest of us.
There's generational experiences through practices that are just real. I can't tell you how many homes that I've worked in as a plumber where there is a very kind-hearted little old Italian woman making sauce.
Oh yeah.
I will fight to the death that that lady is genetically predisposed to making better sauce than other
Oh yeah.
people on the planet. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
It's just life. Her family's
No.
been making homemade pasta sauce for thousands of years.
Hmm.
It just is what it is.
Exactly. um and it doesn't mean she's better or worse than anybody else. It's just that's their particular talent.
She's better at engineering dinner.
Yeah. So because the women in her family have been better at engineering dinner, her family has survived
Yep. Yes. Yeah,
and
it's just
passed that ability on,
yes.
not only genetically but also instruction.
Absolutely. It's literally in the blood at that point. You don't see
Yeah.
these people pulling out recipes and things like that.
Oh, you should watch me in the kitchen. Oh my God.
Right?
um yeah. um my mom did not teach me to cook.
Fair enough.
My mom was territorial.
Mhm.
And you did not touch her washing machine, you did not touch her dryer, you did not go into her kitchen, you did not, except to do dishes, because she hated to do dishes.
Mhm.
And it was her kitchen. And hmm, you know so when I got married at 19, I didn't know how to do diddly squat and had to learn.
Oh, geez.
Well, both of my grandmothers had won awards at various county fairs, so I had the genetics.
Oddly enough, that's outside of your tradition to be sent off so ill prepared for your man, Penny.
Yes, that is outside of my tradition. I did know how to sew. I knew how to sew. I knew how to clean. I knew how to garden. I knew how to take care of animals on a dairy. I even knew how to do certain things on cars.
Mhm. But isn't it funny, like even that we recollect this mentality that a lot of folks probably don't even know used to exist, but like women were supposed to be like marketable for marriage and stuff like that and have skill sets and things. And I mean, good God, like
I
thank
have
God the
so
world has
much
changed.
I have so much trouble talking to younger women who are thinking, all men are evil and blah, 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 blah. I was property.
Mm-hmm.
My father owned me. And when I got married, he literally passed ownership of me to my husband.
I'm so
And
familiar with this
and
mentality. This
and
is what frustrates me. Like
I was
contemporarily.
not,
Go ahead. Sorry.
I had no rights until 1982 when the Supreme Court declared that adult women were responsible adults.
Mm-hmm.
I could not even get a bank account without a cosigner. I could not get a loan without a cosigner. I could not get a job without my father or my husband's written permission.
Yep, these were realities, and this is what makes me laugh now when I see ladies in the street protesting about things and saying that they need their freedoms that they don't have. And I just wonder. I mean, I just want them to talk to you and folks from your generation so that they can find out what not having freedoms really was, because I'm confused contemporarily as to what the issue is. I guess I'm a heathen.
Where I live, they still play the game.
Mm-hmm.
You go into a shop to get something done. And I've had them say it to my face. You know, you come in as a woman, you have a chest, we're tripling the price.
Oh, auto shops and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to see what's happening to women that don't have a partner, because I just send Lou. And he talks to them and he knows what's wrong with the vehicle, and they don't give him a song and dance, and they give him a decent price, except for the Chevy dealer here, and they're crooks.
There's always shysters in every
I'm being
outfit.
honest, guys. The Chevy dealer in my county is they broke my car so that they thought I would have to buy a new one from them. Wrong. I bought another used car from someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not giving them any of my money. So
I used to enjoy going to people's homes all the time. The vast majority of homes that I would enter, it would be the wife that would be home. And I enjoyed the exchanges because I can completely appreciate they must have been treated poorly by somebody else before I showed up. But I treated everybody professionally. You know, I knew that I was there to help, and I never expected anybody to know what I knew, or they wouldn't be calling me. But with that being said, I spoke to everybody in a way that I was hopefully educating them and not condescending. And I charged everyone what the price was. It didn't really matter. So everybody got well. I'm gonna take that back. Actually, you just made me reconsider something. I did actually change prices sometimes in certain freakishly affluent neighborhoods.
Yeah, you figured they could afford it?
No, not in the slightest. It had nothing to do with what they could afford. It had everything to do with the service they were going to require. So my prices were for a standard service.
Yeah.
Show up to somebody's home, I would make a repair, I would leave. I made a great repair. I don't have to worry about it, you know. Is what it is. A Moen faucet in your kitchen is rebuildable infinitely. I could go to your house with a brand new Moen cartridge and rebuild your faucet, and I can guarantee that faucet is going to work for 10 years. I'm very confident in that repair.
Awesome.
I could do that for you. But now a normal human being will let me leave their home, and for 10 years their faucet won't have a problem, and I'll never hear from them. Not in certain neighborhoods. They're going to do a warranty check. They're going to do this. So the next week they're going to call you and they're going to tell you that the faucet was dripping, and it wasn't. But you'll go there with a smile and you'll check and you'll say, oh, okay, cool. Thank you. Call me back if you ever have a problem. Oh, okay, cool. They'll call you next week. I could have sworn I saw something dripping.
Maybe they just liked you. You're turning red.
I've had other customers that liked me, and they treated me differently than that. These are
Just depends
billionaires.
on
These are
kind of
full-blown
like.
billionaires. These were actually some of the worst people that I would ever have to deal with. These were folks that would have trilateral commission paperwork in their magazine racks and stuff like that. These were not the good folks. So yes, I did charge them differently.
Not the good folks.
Yeah.
Come on. You're talking about my relatives.
Well, then we'll boil it down to that. You know what? If they were in the trilateral commission and I overcharged them, then you know what? It is what it is.
I have this attitude that just because you're born into one of those families doesn't mean that you're guilty of everything that the worst ones are doing.
Oh, I will totally go along with that as well. In those households, there were folks that I would say absolutely were towing the family heritage. But then there were discrepancies in the family lines. So you are right. I do not want to always paint with a broad brush to be all encompassing. So sometimes the brush can get a little bit fatter, but never does that brush get fat enough to be all encompassing and paint that broadly.
Good. Now, I've had folks send me hate mail. Yes, I am related to those people. No, they don't claim me. My family is a discarded line that was forgotten about. And when I found my family tree and started talking about it, some of them have contacted me. Most of them have been very rude. I have the ones that I should say are evaluating me have been extremely polite. Some have been nice. But the majority of them basically call me a piece of shit. So, it is what it is. I'm not asking anything of them. It would be nice to know what the family heritage is. I'm not asking for a piece of the pie. So I think they're worried about that.
I believe that 100%. That's actually one of the things that I saw in these households, the old big money households. Everything became about money. It was savage how it put brother against brother and generation against generation. And it was as if every conversation, the people felt like the intent was to get money out of them. I would be privy to full-blown family arguments going on, and then different people coming in and out of the room, or I'm transitioning to a different room, and I'd be getting, the ear of whoever, and they'd be like, he's been like that for a decade, and he just wants my money, and then my dad, and you don't understand what's going on in this house, and he's always been like that, and she backs him up, and it's insane. There's so much wealth, but yet they have to argue about who.
It's never enough.
It's never enough. It's so never enough.
And I'm not that way. I'm like, Lou and I have enough between us to live day to day, to live month to month, and we are perfectly happy. But if I want to travel, or if I have to buy a new video camera or something like that, then we have a little bit of a problem.
That's when you get start getting creative.
Yeah, on a day-to-day basis, I'm perfectly content. I have looked at what would happen to me if I suddenly made thousands of dollars, and to be honest, it would jeopardize a lot of the support system that I have in place.
Mm-hmm.
And so the biggest problem I have right now is that the landlady raised the rent to more than what my check is. So I'm fine as long as Lou's alive and doesn't decide I've bitchy enough that he walks out. I don't anticipate him doing that. He's been with me for 20 years, but still, it's always kind of in the back of your head when you know you're weird.
I can follow that.
So, yeah. Your lady and my Lou, their discussion about life with people with alters was very enlightening
Yeah.
and a bit disturbing.
I get enlightened and disturbed pretty regularly, but her and I are good communicators, so we work through things just like you and Lou do.
Yeah.
She's a very patient soul. I'm very blessed to have her.
Lou told me one day that I was his assignment. In the context, it was kind of disturbing. So,
You know, it's funny. I imagine that Lou has wheelbarrows full of patience, but I could also imagine that when you push him to his line, he's going to let you know that you need to calm the hell down, I bet.
when I push him to the line, he goes out and takes a 10-mile hike.
There you go.
And he takes a couple of 3 hours doing it. And yeah.
There you go. Now I picture you going, Lou, take a hike. And he probably goes, I will.
No, I'm like trying to get an answer out of him and he just leaves. He's one of those, he doesn't like to give a straight answer.
Oh, NASA?
Yeah, I can't get a straight answer out of him on anything. There are things I need a decision and he won't. And I will push him for a decision because,
it makes me wonder, because now just thinking big picture, Lou's probably sitting there going, this altar's asking me right now, and it really doesn't matter. And I'm going to have to talk to another one about this later. I'm going to have to give that one a different answer. Poor Lou.
He realizes that most of them share memory these days.
Oh, okay. That's good.
So there's a couple of them that don't.
Okay.
And it gets to be interesting sometimes. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. What gets me is when I get up in the morning and I have a missing 3 hours and I realize he's being awfully quiet over there. And I say, good morning. And I can hear him. And I'm thinking to myself, just how bad was I? So, yeah. Life like this is interesting. And then I get told, well, you're just faking it all. And I'm like, oh God, I wish I were.
That would be so much more fun.
I wish I were. You can't fake it like this.
Yeah. Good luck with that. That would be, yeah, no. That would be
okay.
a genius level of stuff.
You wanted to ask about something else, you said. You had a list.
I'm checking right now. So we had done Robert Monroe and The Shadow. So just big picture stuff of where my brain has been at lately in my digging into rabbit holes and such. I had sent you a link earlier in an email that was a song about a gentleman named Claude Dallas. I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at that at all.
I saw it, but didn't have time to listen.
No worries. It was simply just a country western song, but it was made about a gentleman named Claude Dallas. Does that name ring a bell to you from the 80s, perchance? He was the nation's most wanted man. I believe it was in 1981. And he was running from the feds out of Idaho at the time.
In 1981, I had a child who wanted to live in the hospital, and I was a full-time student at San Diego State.
Okay. So
I had a very full plate.
So this guy was I don't know if you recall, but back in the 70s.
What was he wanted for?
Double homicide with federal agents.
He did what?
Double homicide of some federal agents.
That I do remember. It was not a real common thing for federal agents to be killed.
Correct. So back in the 70s was apparently when they started enforcing, I guess, like hunting licenses and things is what I'm being told, as far as enforcing it. That, you used to have to go get permits and licenses and stuff, but there wasn't really anyone running around in the middle of places enforcing it. But apparently they started doing it. And at the time, they said one of the best ways for you to get the heat off of your back would be to roll on someone else doing something worse than you, which is pretty common cop tactic. We've seen it before. So in this area, people were rolling and rolling and rolling till eventually the feds were looking for this man, Claude.
Mm-hmm.
They made movies about this man, actually, back in the 80s, TV series, songs, all kinds of stuff. He's actually known as the Last American Outlaw.
That I remember.
This is Claude Dallas, the Last American Outlaw. He lived off the land out in the middle of nowhere like an old school American. He was like the last one. So since he hunted and trapped to sustain himself and to live and to have goods for market, he certainly wasn't following licensing practices.
No.
But he was living off of the land and killing and using. Excuse me. Long story short, folks in the area who didn't want to get in trouble turned him in. The feds went out.
It would have been so simple if they had just left him alone.
They could have just simply left him alone. He wasn't bothering anyone.
Yeah.
But instead, they went out to what Claude considered his home.
Mm-hmm.
These were armed men who were accusing him of federal crimes. And he was not acquiescing. Excuse me, I'm tickling my throat. But long story short, they wanted to go on his property and gather evidence inside his home. A lot of people would say, well, it's just a tent and he's in the woods, and how, he doesn't have a right.
They were supposed to have a warrant.
They were supposed to have warrants. They were supposed to be doing a lot of stuff as far as he was concerned. They apparently, according to his testimony, overstepped all lines and were going to kill him because he was not acquiescing. He was standing up for himself. He says they drew on him, or were going to.
Well, under the old rule, rules
of fighting with words and things like that, right? So he's the type of person that basically would say he was a fighting man. So from his description, he was saying that in that moment, he knew those men intended to kill him.
Yeah.
So he stopped it by killing them.
And in the old days, pre-1950, that was standard practice. You stood your ground, you defended yourself, and if they drew first and they didn't have a warrant, then you were within your rights.
You're technically within your rights today to do that. Technically.
Yeah. Well, you are, but nobody gets by with it anymore.
No one got by with it when he did it.
So
he drew on them and finished the job.
Yeah.
And then, basically, he was on the run at that point, and they wound up catching him eventually. He did go to jail. He did escape from jail as well. And he went on the run again, which this is why his story was fantastic. So they called him the Last Outlaw, and made songs, made movies, and so on and so forth. And the reason that I had brought this up was because I had just remembered that when I had first come up to Alaska, one of the first contracts that I picked up for working out remotely in the bush, in the middle of nowhere, in a fly-in, fly-out capacity. And, excuse me, I was just told to be really nice to the guy that I was going to be working with, that he was, a good man, but he was a fair and straight shooter.
Yeah.
So
Fair and straight shooter can mean a lot of things.
yeah, but he was a hard working back, like, I was going out to the middle of nowhere in Alaska for the first
Mhm.
time, so I was relatively concerned, hey, what's going on here? And this is new to me.
Yeah.
Don't worry, we got a guy. He knows everything about what it's like to live in the woods. It'll be okay.
Was it him?
Yep, it was Claude. So
You knew Claude?
yeah,
Oh my
I
goodness.
camped out in the middle of nowhere with Claude, and we built our camp. We did our contract. We shared stories, and it was an amazing, amazing conversation. And he taught me a lot of stuff. There's different
Okay.
histories. This is what amazes me about, like, the digging and the rabbit holes, and you make connections, and then there's
Uh-huh.
so many things that you just forget, and you have to remember
Yeah.
all the time. And people,
Uh, I've reached the point. I have been digging so long. I'm on level 10 of the rabbit hole.
mhm,
And people ask me about things at level 1 and 2, and I'm like, I'm having trouble with the details
mhm,
because I'm way past that. And oh, for me, level 9 was understanding that there are actually two species of humans here.
mhm.
And level 10 was understanding that I was the other one.
There you go.
And and if you think that is not a shock to your system,
Mhm,
because all of my life I have been considered poor white trash. So when these people approached me and started calling me a piece of shit, that was what I had actually expected from them.
mhm.
The ones that have been pleasant have been a pleasant surprise. That was what I had hoped for, was that I would be spoken to. Some of the family heritage would be shared with me, and that I would be treated like the distant poor relation that I am. And so it's been interesting to meet them.
Mhm.
Um, some of them I look enough like them to be their sibling. And that was a bit of a shock because they look more like me than my siblings do.
Mhm.
And so that took some adjusting as well, because they're rich and powerful people, and I look just like them, and I'm not. And for folks, one of the ones that calls me a piece of shit told me that I'm scaring the slaves. So I'm still trying to figure out if that was a friendly warning or if that was a threat.
It just dawned on me. I had told you previously one of the stories from the camp that I was in with Claude, but I had never mentioned to you who I was in the camp with.
No, you didn't.
So this is just a camp so Claude and I were here, and I didn't know what I was getting into technically, but a
Yeah.
storm came and socked us in, and we had hunkered down into one tent, and it was pretty spacious. It's a weatherport tent, so it's not like we're on top of each other, but we hunkered down one structure.
Might have been warmer if you had been on top of each other.
Theoretically, well, we had a drip stove in the tent. We had a heat
Oh,
source,
okay.
but we were hunkering down for perchance that we brought everything into one spot. We didn't
Yeah.
intend the rest of the camp holding together, but in this process, I became educated as to who Claude was, and this is like the right time to get to find out, right? Like now that we're, you know,
Oh, what? Like
yeah,
my second husband, I found out on my honeymoon that he was a mafia hitman.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, too
yeah.
late to back out.
I was out in the middle of nowhere with a guy that is most known for killing people out in the middle of nowhere. So he tells me his whole story. The storm does what it's doing or whatever. And at one point in the night, he did retire out to what was supposed to be his tent. He didn't stay in there. The camp pretty much held together.
Good.
But the next morning when we woke up, I got a knock on my tent, and it was Claude outside. And, since I was the resident plumber, he informed me that in the 100-mile-an-hour winds that we had the night before, he says, and he sounded like the guy from Sling Blade, and he turns to me and he goes, I opened the door and I go, hey, Claude, what's going on? And he goes, the outhouse blew over. That's a plumbing problem. And I just looked at him dead, like no pause. I just said, aye, aye. I'm on it. I'm so on this. You got to go to the bathroom? I got this covered, bro. Don't kill me. I can be extremely agreeable. What would you like for breakfast? Yeah, I became the happiest guy on the job site. Want me to fix that for you, Claude? Don't be flipping out.
Yeah, I can see you being like that. Oh, we only have a couple of minutes for you to shamelessly plug your stuff.
Oh, no problem at all. I actually have a few things going on.
I know you do.
I am, as usual, I'm on MeWe at Deciphering My Experience. I am also on YouTube for the time being at Deciphering My Experience. I have more interviews coming up. I will be on Monday nights, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. I'll be on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network, so tune in this Monday. I have also been lining up more interviews. I will be speaking tomorrow with Tony Rodriguez on his show. I don't know if I'll be able to scalp a recording out of that one or not, but we'll either hear that one on Tony's and mine, or he did say that he would love to chat with me on my show in the future at some other point. So look out for both of those. Okay. Tony and I have been talking behind the scenes a bit, trying to get to know each other a little bit more. Our stories have some similarities. We do want to discuss them. So I guess it's just a matter of, figuring out the time and, how much do we discuss stuff off of air versus on air for the people. So we're just trying to dial it in. And then recently,
Tony, we both went public together and we knew each other just before then. So it's been, he's an incredible person.
He is. Tony's a really nice guy. I enjoy talking to him. And I think because he's a tradesman, I don't know. I guess there's a familiarity there. I don't know, which is who he is. So I feel like I get along great with him because I just feel like he's some other schmo from the job site. No disrespect to schmoes from job sites.
I usually like schmoes from job sites.
Me too. That's what it really boils down to. It's just very realistic conversation, no pretenses or anything like that. So I enjoy Tony because he's just a very humble guy that can keep it very real. And then I also was lucky enough to get in touch with another guy that I know that you've been on the air with a while ago, Mr. Rex Bear of the Leak Project.
He was on the team who did my initial interview.
Correct.
And that would have gone a lot differently if it had been just him or just Jay. But
totally understood.
The combination was very hard for me.
Mm-hmm. It was a different time of your life and coming out and stuff.
They were trying to go in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very difficult for me as a speaker to do that. And I look at it now and think, I didn't do a very good job on that, but it was very hard for me in the moment.
I can appreciate that. I had a lot of trouble speaking about stuff when I first was talking as well. It's just like you get choked up. You're like, what do you want me to say?
Yeah. And I'm glad that you've been coming on my show.
I'm so happy that you have.
I appreciate that a lot. And for people who are just checking us out this time, Eric and I have known each other, 2 years now?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So, and Lou and I have spent time at Eric's house. So,
you should say visited, not spent time. It wasn't a sentence. You visited.
This is a California term. We spent time there,
Yeah, it is a California term, right?
I'm a Californian, and
Penny and Lou came to visit my big house.
Yeah, no, it was wonderful to spend time with someone who actually understands what it's like to be living in a body with alters,
I agree.
and to not always have control over what is expressed, and to have to live with the consequences of it anyway. And I was incredibly impressed by his library, and I've bought some of the books there from Abe Books. And there's another website, but Abe Books is the one that was easiest to work with. And Lou has been teasing me that I'm buying books. um, so anyway,
That's all good.
we are
Knowledge is
over
power.
time. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me, Penny.
And for our audience on air, the next show is Ramona Speaks the Other Truth.